So once again, we have a case that a body wasn't discovered for many, many years.
She went missing on November 20th, 1987. She was independent. She was in the military. She had a very responsible job. Margie Pointer was 27 years old when she went missing. She was last seen eating breakfast with an unidentified man at the local Holiday Inn. She paid her bill, walked out the door, and was never seen again. At that time, she was married and had a small son who was only 5 years old.
And then her remains were found in 2004.
17 years later.
Yeah.
When Margie Pointer walked out the door of that Holiday Inn, she left us with no DNA evidence and no cause of death. The statute of limitations for second-degree murder has run out, so our job this week is to see if the evidence warrants a first-degree murder element of deliberate and find the person who killed Margie 27 years after her death.
It has been 16 years and still no answer.
Police consider her killing a cold case.
Years later, the case is still unsolved.
There are so many cold cases out there just waiting to be solved.
The crime scene ultimately tells the story of the murder.
We want to bring justice to these victims. Hello.
Hey.
Lieutenant Cloudcroft, I'm Kelly. Nice to meet you.
Miss Sue.
Yolanda, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too.
So we understand you got promoted.
Today was my first day of my promotion.
You've been in law enforcement how long?
24 years.
How'd you end up with this case?
The case had always kind of haunted me. In 1991, I went through all the case files, so that's kind of where I put eyes on it, and then I went off about my duties because I was a patrolman, started out at the bottom here. And then in 2010, I tried to breathe some life back into it. Started going through all the original case files, talking to the detectives that worked it back then. Basically, started building the case from that point.
Nice.
During the process of working these cases, we're talking to family and friends, associates, and the more you dig into the case, the more vested you become in it. Basically a fire that burns inside of all of us that work these cases. Hard to put that fire out.
And he sounds like he's kind of a nerd, too.
Might be a little bit, yes.
Do you have a place for us to set up and work in? Look who's here.
Hey.
To meet Johnny.
Johnny Bond.
Yeah. I'm reading this case, and she was just a beautiful young woman. Had a young son and 2 living sisters that deserved to know what happened to her. If we can solve a case, that's what it's all about.
Y'all want to start with putting Margie up on the board?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a nice picture. Where'd you get that?
Air Force picture.
Margie was formerly in the Air Force, and that's where she met her husband. At the time of her disappearance, he was still enlisted and stationed in Japan. Why don't you start around the day of the murder, what was going on in Margie Pointer's life?
It was November the 20th of 1987. Her normal habits of the day were to drop her son, who was 5 years old at the time, at a babysitter. She dropped him off around 6 o'clock in the morning. At that point, she went to a local place where she's known to carpool from, which is the Holiday Inn. She was seen having coffee that morning with a male subject who was described as being approximately 10 to 15 years older than her. He was wearing a cowboy hat, cowboy boots. Then they got up and left. Sometime around 7 o'clock in the morning, that's the last time she was ever accounted for.
Margie called in sick to her job at RATSCAT, which is a military radar and testing area where she worked as a purchasing agent. But when she didn't pick up her son from the babysitter that day, her husband was notified.
The case was originally taken as a missing person case. Then the search began at that point to try to find out where she had gone to. 17 years later, in 2004, a forest team crew up on Sunspot Highway came across the partial skeletal remains of what they suspected to be a human, which were later found to be hers.
The next thing the police did was look into how involved her husband could be, but he was investigated and cleared. So next in Margie's inner circle was a man named Philip Crawford, who, unbeknownst to her husband, was actually living with Margie at the time. The reasons we are suspicious of him are...
Live-in boyfriend.
Margie said numerous times that she was going to get a divorce and wanted to marry him. Margie had openly been having an affair with Philip Crawford for several months. Now, Philip knew that Margie was married, but Margie's husband knew nothing about Philip.
The only reason I could see that he would have a motive would be jealousy.
If Philip was in love with Margie and Margie had either refused to leave her husband or taken up with someone else, it wouldn't be the first time that would be our motivation for a murder. All right, what about unusual way he left town?
Sold his bike for basically half of the money for a ticket to go.
Skipped out quick. She's gone, and 3 days later, he leaves the country.
Philip was visiting from England when he met and fell in love with Margie. He moved in with her, even talked about marriage, but the minute she disappeared, he was on a plane back to England. That doesn't look very good for him.
Where is he living now? Do we
Last
know?
location we had was Liverpool, England. I have sent a fax request to Interpol to see if they can relocate him.
Okay. In addition to Philip, our other suspect is Pete Mullins. Margie and Pete, they were co-workers, they were friends, but when Pete was first ever interviewed, he acted like he didn't even know Margie.
The only thing we were co-workers at work, and we rode in carpools.
They were family friends. I mean, the wives and husbands knew each other.
Was he important to her at work?
He was a supervisor.
Okay, so the morning of, they both missed work.
Yeah.
One difficulty at putting Pete and Margie together that day is that they both had different plans. Margie planned on going to work that day, but Pete had said he planned on going hunting that day. In fact, Pete did show up at a co-worker's hunting cabin that evening. The problem is that cabin turned out to be less than 4 miles from where Margie's body was found 17 years later. Pete was close to Margie, and there were some strange coincidences surrounding her death, but right now, any motive he might have had is unclear. And in a case where you have to prove first-degree murder, motive is always going to be a very important factor. So in this pool of really good potential witnesses, how many of them are still around and still alive?
All of them are still alive.
Nice. That's why we're here. That's why we're
amazing.
here. A first-degree murder in New Mexico has to be committed in a willful and deliberate way. Since we don't have a crime scene or any DNA, we're going to need to find witnesses who can show that it was committed in a willful or deliberate way. That's the only way we're going to ever be able to get justice for Margie Pointer and her family. Today we're going to meet Margie's sister, Jeannie. I'm Kelly.
Kelly, I'm Jeannie.
Nice to meet you. Even though Jeannie didn't live in Alamogordo back then, she and Margie were very close. We just wanted to meet you and answer some of your questions and tell you not to worry and not to be nervous.
Okay.
I haven't met any of the family, so I'm just looking at her face, you know.
See the similarities?
Yeah. We've been working on the case a long time, and so it's been a long, many-year journey for me, so. And then seeing a face, you know, part of the family. It's good to see you.
It's good to finally meet you, and I'm so appreciative that you folks have stepped in to help us get this resolved, hopefully.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about Margie?
The thing about my sister, Margie, she had the best sense of humor. I could always talk to her, and she would make me laugh or ease my worries, whatever it was that I was going through.
How about her relationship with her son?
Oh, gosh. I would call her nowadays one of the overprotective mothers.
So did y'all ever feel like Margie would have just up and left her son?
Of course not.
Okay.
When her remains were found, everybody kept saying, well, now you've got closure. Now you know that she's in peace, she's in heaven. No, we don't have closure.
That's a psychological bullshit word, but maybe you can get justice, and that's what we're going to try and do.
I wish my father were here to see everyone so hard at work on this.
Ready to get to work?
I am ready.
Let's go work.
Good morning. It's Roger. Thanks for taking my call. We wanted to ask you a few more questions if we could.
Another key family member in this case is Margie's husband.
I think it was June of '87. You got sent to Japan for 2 years. Is that correct?
Initially it was 2 years, but Margie couldn't go immediately because at that time there was a housing shortage.
Right. Now, I got to ask you some hard questions, and I know this is hard for you. The day she disappeared, you called her from Japan, and this guy, Philip Crawford, answered the phone. Do you remember that phone call?
I was shocked when he answered the phone, and he said, she's not there. As I recall, like, what the hell are you talking about? He said, she never came home from work, and that's when I really freaked out. And I said, well, I don't know who you are or why you're in my house. You need to get the hell out. I'm coming home to find out what's going on.
When you got back, did you talk to your son about what was going on?
We did. I mean, he was only 5 years old, but did the best we could.
It's obvious that it's right under the surface for him. Bringing up basically like scratching an old wound.
Did he tell you anything that we need to know?
He told me there was a hole in the wall.
How big was that hole?
It was about the size of a softball. He told me it was from his mother fighting with Philip.
We are in Alamogordo, New Mexico. Our victim is Margie Pointer. She was 27 years old. We don't know exactly how she was murdered, so we need to focus on what happened that morning back when Margie disappeared.
This is Margie Pointer and her husband, family's house right here.
Right.
Right after they purchased the houses when he ended up getting his orders to Japan.
You can't ever put your roots down anywhere, you know? I know that. I was a military brat. Moved a lot. Because the victim disappeared in 1987 and they didn't find her bones for 17 years, we really don't have a crime scene, so we want to retrace her steps from that morning.
So she leaves here between 5:45 and 6.
Drops off her son. From there, goes to the Holiday Inn where she would always leave her car to carpool.
Let's go over there and I'll show you where her car was found.
Margie was last seen at 9 a.m. at the local Holiday Inn, just a few miles from her house. She was seen there with an unknown, older man dressed in cowboy attire. Fits the description of Pete Mullins.
Just to kind of explain how it was set up back then. The tan-colored car, that was right where her vehicle was parked. A lot of people would come in here early, jump into one vehicle, and head out to the base. It wasn't anything unusual where her vehicle was parked. If you look right back up here, just north of the Denny's restaurant is where Philip Crawford worked up there.
The fact that Philip Crawford worked at a car dealership less than 3 blocks from where Margie went missing also puts him in the middle of our world that particular day.
That was a little car dealership he worked at.
Place then.
Right.
Mattress place now, yeah.
27 years ago, around 7 a.m., Margie stepped out of this Holiday Inn and she disappeared. We're pretty sure that 1 of 2 people can tell us what happened. Either Pete Mullins, who she might have been with, or Philip Crawford, who was her boyfriend at the time. We want to talk to all of Margie's friends to see if any of them can tell us which one of those it might have been.
Have a seat right there if you would, Kathy. Yeah.
Did she ever confide in you about her personal life, about her feelings, about her marriage?
I remember Margie being discouraged that they had just got the house and now he had to take off. Margie developed a relationship with someone that we had met when we were out. That would be Philip.
She was afraid to be alone. Margie just wanted somebody out there so she wouldn't be alone because her husband was in Japan.
Trying to get a hold of June Hatcher.
This is June.
Do you remember Margie Pointer when you worked out at Ratscat?
Yes.
What did you know about her?
You know, she was pretty social.
Anybody in particular you remember?
There was one guy, he was a younger guy.
What was his name?
I do not remember that. I do know he was English, from England.
Oh, English guy, right, okay. Did you know Pete Mullins also?
I do.
What do you know about Pete Mullins?
I know they used to ride to work together, just the 2 of them. But I had heard that there was more to it than just the carpooling.
One of the co-workers assumed that there was some kind of an affair going on between Pete Mullins and Margie. You know, the old man's got him a young girl and they're having an affair. That could be a possible motive.
There was rumors.
Did you ever confront her about it?
No.
These rumors of an affair have always been around. We're going to really have to prove it if we want to show that's the motive. We need to expand our questioning to find co-workers of Margie and Pete to see if they have any information as to whether or not this affair was ever more than just a lot of rumors.
There was a lot of talk back then about Margie and Pete. What?
Oh, yeah, they had something going on. They were always together. They rode together, you know.
And you saw that? You saw that?
Oh, yeah.
How many times would you see Margie in his office?
I would say 3 times out of the week.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Did you ever see Margie Pointer in his office?
Yes.
How many times?
Every day at lunch.
For how long did that go on?
Oh, gosh, months.
Did you ever hear any loud discussions or arguments in that office?
Yes, I did.
Was it a one-sided argument, her yelling at him, or
No.
him yelling at her?
Both of them were going at it pretty good. I don't have no idea what they were arguing. I can't even remember the argument.
We have an argument between them at work to the degree that it's so loud, Poindexter heard about it. That's huge. I just wish that he also heard the words spoken in the argument, because then it would establish that it was a lover's quarrel, which would go a long way in establishing motive.
Mr. Boss?
Nice meeting you. I called and left one message. Let's call these bottom 2. I already left a message on that top one. Several weeks ago, Lieutenant Cloudcroft had called Interpol and asked them to try to locate Philip Crawford in England.
Hey, Maria, it's Roger. Did I get anything back from Interpol yet?
No, sir, nothing.
After we'd been here a couple of days and they haven't replied, I thought we better start trying to find him some other way. Yes, ma'am. My name's Johnny Bonds. I'm a retired homicide detective from Houston.
We've been tracking down some leads in Florida.
Philip Crawford?
Yes, sir.
No, I'm sorry.
Trying to locate other family members, and it's frustrating.
We're sorry. The number you dialed is not a working number.
Yes, ma'am. Do you know Philip Crawford? I think his dad was in... No, we didn't know his brother lived here. What's his brother's name? We tracked down Philip's brother, and he eventually leads us to a number for Philip over in England. No one had talked to him about this case since 1990. If he's our killer, everything's riding on how this phone call goes.
Mr. Crawford, this is Detective Lieutenant Schoolcraft from the Alamogordo, New Mexico Police Department.
After making calls all over the world, we tracked down our suspect, Philip Crawford, in England. His reaction to us could change the entire course of this investigation.
Mr. Crawford, this is Detective Lieutenant Schoolcraft from the Alamogordo, New Mexico Police Department. I wanted just to talk to you about when you first met Margie, leading up to when you finally ended up leaving back to England.
Philip agrees to speak with us, so we ended up spending about an hour on the phone with him, trying to find out if he had anything to do with this murder. You remember there was a hole in the wall in the bedroom. Y'all had a fight and there was a hole in the wall.
He admits he was in a relationship with Margie Pointer, that they met at a local nightclub in 1987. Soon afterwards, he moved in with her.
Immediately after this happened, everybody's all, yeah, that kid from England, she ran off with him, or he did something to her. I said, you took off. And you go and you sell everything, and you try and raise money, and you buy a ticket, and you go back to England. That makes you look like a suspect. If we ask you to take a polygraph test now, would you? I asked him, I said, did you ever take a polygraph test on this? And he said, no. And I said, would you take one now? And he said, yeah, if you want me to. All right. You got anything else, Roger?
No, sir, I'm good.
Good night, sir.
Bye-bye, Phil.
Let's talk about Philip Crawford.
Y'all found him?
Yes.
Oh, my God, where does he live?
England.
How the hell did you find him?
A lot of phone calls. He left because he was afraid of the husband.
Okay, so look up on the board on Philip Crawford. Y'all are clear on what their relationship was.
He wasn't hiding anything.
How much did Philip pick up on the relationship between Margie and Pete?
I think absolutely none.
You think we got a jealousy motive going on?
No.
Yeah. What about temper? He put the hole in the wall.
He put the hole in the wall, but he didn't even remember what he was about.
Unusual way to leave the country?
I understand why he left the country. He didn't want to be here when the husband got back.
Gotcha.
He was upset she was gone.
Gone, didn't know what to think.
He was losing his place to live, and one day his whole world gets turned upside down.
Okay, guys, what do you think about whether he still needs to be on our suspect board?
He doesn't need to be on the board anymore.
Okay, Johnny?
He's not a suspect.
Yo?
Cross him off.
All right, let's mark him off. Knock off a whole suspect, heck.
Every impression I got, he's not a killer. And I've talked to killers, and he doesn't strike me as being a killer. He was in love with her. There's no doubt he was. He was very, very emotional when he told me. I was an irresponsible young man. She was just a sweetheart, and he didn't have anything to do with killing Margie. So that leaves us with one suspect, Peter Mullins.
Everyone, this is retired Detective Kerry Jarrett. This is Kelly Siegler.
Detective Kerry Jarrett was a police officer in the area where Margie's remains were found. So we want his insight on the location of her body to see whether or not that can connect to Pete.
Her remains were found here, which is exactly 3.7 miles to the cabin that our suspect showed up in.
Right.
Margie's body was found just off of a stretch of road known as Sunspot Highway. The thing about Pete's alibi is that he says he was never on Sunspot Highway.
In his statement in 2004 to law enforcement, he had traveled from Alamogordo, and he had taken this route all the way back through the mountains on his hunting trip that day.
He claims that on that day, he took his RV and went hunting in the mountains, but in a different area known as Sacramento Lake. But we also know that he showed up that evening around 5:30 p.m. at his friend's hunting cabin. If you take the Sunspot Highway from Sacramento Lake, it's only about 24 miles to the hunting cabin, and you would pass the location where Margie's remains were found. But Pete says he never took the Sunspot Highway. Instead, he claims that he drove over 65 miles on a gravel road in an RV in order to get to the cabin.
That's a lot of mileage right there through very windy roads where the speed limit is
15, 20 miles an hour.
It would be difficult to do that.
Especially with an RV?
Especially with an RV.
So we're on our way right now to the site where Margie's skeletal remains were found 17 years after she disappeared.
We need to examine the connection between the hunting cabin and where her remains were found. Because the only reason we see for Pete's alleged route is to keep his name away from the Sunspot Highway. Her body was found in a turnout at the bottom of a ravine.
This is a beautiful spot. This is a great spot.
It was and still is an area used by hunters to dump animal carcasses.
So how far from right here to where the actual skull was found, the body?
About 50 feet. I suspect what he did is he just dumped her body right here. That's an elk carcass.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll find them quite a bit up here, part of the hip section.
Right,
of the,
right.
Of the
The first thing I'm seeing, like, my God, look at the bone.
Yeah. So you can see a little clearing past these two first trees here. He probably just dumped her body off right here.
The first thing that I noticed was, wow, I thought our killer took some effort in hiding her out in some wooded, secluded area. It's an obvious pull-up spot for any car to pull over. Do you think he just threw her? He didn't walk down there and place her?
No, he threw her.
He didn't have to carry her very far. He didn't have to put her anywhere. He didn't have to cover her. He didn't have to dig a hole. He didn't have to do anything but just take her lifeless body, walk over to the side of a cliff when below it is nothing but rocks and darkness and wild animals, and let her go.
Of the few bones that were recovered after 17 years in the elements, none of them could tell us how Margie was killed. So we need to find another way for this crime scene to connect us to our suspect.
Roger, point to where the cabin is from here.
Cabin's right there.
Just through the wood area right over there.
Let's go look at the cabin.
All right.
All right.
I'm going to time it, too, just so that we have a general time. I think once he dumped her body, he'd get the hell out of there. He's not going to sit around and mourn or think about it or anything else. He's going to be moving along in case somebody else pulls up.
That's right.
He's probably driving around at that time trying to figure out what he's going to do next after what has just happened.
That's kind of what I'm thinking, too. You guys, we're only talking like 8 minutes.
It's this house right here.
Okay, the white one?
But obviously, he had a bird's eye view of his RV.
I think he's just making an appearance.
I think so, too.
So could this be that he was just trying to alibi himself?
Exactly right. I was out hunting all day. I even joined up with the boys. All those boys are still alive.
Yeah, that's a good thing, huh?
We have living witnesses who were at the hunting cabin that night, and they need to be questioned. What they saw or heard from Pete might be the key to solving a murder that's been cold for 27 years. When he was interviewed by law enforcement, Pete Mullins said that on the day of Margie's disappearance, he went on a hunting trip that had been planned. We want to find out if this hunting trip was really something Pete had planned in advance, or if he just coincidentally went on this hunting trip the very same day Margie disappeared.
When Margie disappeared, it was during hunting season. I had asked Pete before I left if he was going hunting. He told me he wasn't.
Was not?
He was not going hunting.
Okay.
Beautiful. Out of the mouth of Pete, I'm not going hunting. And how come all of a sudden he's popping up hunting the same day Margie disappeared?
Point blank, I said, Pete, I said, are you planning on going hunting this year again? He said, well, you know, I don't think I'm going hunting this year. And he kind of disappointed me because he was my immediate supervisor.
How was he to work for?
You know, he was awful demanding, you know. Just
not
kinda,
satisfied with you.
Yeah, not satisfied.
You know exactly that kind of a boss.
Oh, yeah. Everybody's all disappointed because he ain't leaving.
You said at least 3 times that you specifically asked him. I did. And every time he said, no, I'm not going. Okay.
Nice. This is beautiful because that's Pete's alibi. If that's not true and Pete is making up the story, why is he lying?
Hello? Mr. Bellows?
Yes, sir.
The most important witnesses in this case could be the men that were at the hunting cabin.
Johnny Bonds.
Because they would have seen Pete and talked to him that night when he showed up.
Do you remember who went up there with you?
So, Bill Bellows and Pat Bellows.
Okay.
And, of course, Pete Mullins came later.
Pete shows up. Were you surprised? Did you have any idea he was going to show up?
No, I did not.
Were y'all surprised to see him there?
I was, because I didn't know he was coming.
Was something said the day before about come on by, or we're going to play poker?
I don't believe I asked him.
Okay. Was there anything unusual about him?
Yeah, I know he was scratched up. His face was scratched up, and he had something wrong with his thumb.
He had slipped on the ice, he said.
Mm-hmm.
Fell down into some bushes. He sprained his thumb, he said, and gotten a scratch on his cheek.
Well, it was long scratches.
Down the side of his face?
Yeah.
How many scratches did you see?
About the best I can remember, a couple.
Do you remember somebody taking his picture?
I did.
You took the picture?
Yes.
What happened when you took that picture?
He seemed to get upset.
What'd he say?
Why are you doing that? Or something like that.
Did you think it was kind of strange?
Yeah.
The one picture that Jim Hiller was able to take is one of Pete sitting there with his baseball cap on, with his face turned to the side. Unfortunately, it's turned to the wrong dang side. If it would have just been turned this way, we could have evidence in a picture of the scratches.
After that one time he showed up at your cabin, over the years that came by and passed, did he ever come up to your cabin again?
No, he never came back.
Okay.
You got to think about the coincidences, because coincidences are circumstantial evidence. If that was Pete at the Holiday Inn, maybe he convinced Margie to call in sick. Maybe they go off in his RV and pull around, and that afternoon, something went wrong. So we have to see whether or not all of that might have gone down in a way that will justify a first-degree murder charge, including deliberate. What we have to try and focus on is things that go to show he was intent and deliberate and wanted to make sure she was dead. Deliberate means showing the suspect thought about and considered for and against the actions that caused her death, even if that decision was made in a short period of time. We got a jammed thumb, we got scratches on the face. If he goes to strangle her in his RV, he's not doing it for anything but one reason.
It takes about a minute and a half to choke somebody.
That long?
Yes. A manual strangulation isn't that quick. I got something I want to show you.
Okay.
Just from his injuries, this is consistent with a frontal manual strangulation. They're fighting. The first thing she does...
She's trying to make him let go.
You can hurt somebody like that, and even a woman can hurt a big man.
And then, scratch.
It doesn't take but 15 seconds to 20 seconds for her to black out. It's going to take another minute at least to kill her.
So a minute and a half of consistent pressure, never letting go, never changing your mind, never taking it back. How is that not deliberate?
All right. Sounds good.
We feel that we have now established the deliberate element of this crime with witnesses to back it up. But the word about this investigation is spreading fast through this town.
Looks like they're home.
We're going to go to Pete's right now because we need to hear his version of how it all went down.
Hi, how are you?
Just fine.
Are you Miss Mullins?
Yes.
I'm Roger Schoolcraft from the PD, and this is Johnny Bonds. He's another...
Hi, Miss Mullins.
I know what you want to talk to me about. And I don't have anything to tell you. I know nothing. I am highly offended that you think my husband has done something. That's not who we are. I'm not interested in going over this with you.
We're at the home of our suspect, Pete Mullins, hoping to talk to him, but right now his wife is standing in the way.
All I'm trying to do is figure out what happened.
I don't have a clue what happened.
Is Mr. Mullins in? Can we talk?
Yes, Mr. Mullins is in, and no, he won't talk to you.
He won't come to the door and talk to us?
No, he won't talk.
Y'all don't want to help us find out what happened to Margie? You don't care?
I do care, and I want you to find the truth. But you're not. You're on a witch hunt for my husband.
If we talk with it...
Not going to happen.
Ma'am?
We're not going to be talking to Pete anytime soon, so that means we're going to have to finish our case with the few witnesses that we have left. We're so close, but it would be great to strengthen our motive and to put Pete at the scene.
Mr. Bates.
Yes.
Hey, it's Detective Lieutenant Schoolcraft down in Alamogordo. How are you?
I'm good.
Donnie Bates is a relative of Margie's husband. Right when Margie's husband realized that she was missing, he asked Donnie to take care of their son before he could get home. In all these years, no one thought to talk to him, and Roger had the great idea to call Donnie just in case he might know something about what happened that very first night.
Let's go back to around November the 20th, 1987. I guess you arrived in town soon after that date, correct?
Yes, but there were several people there when we arrived, and I believe it was Pete and his wife, I'm pretty sure. And I was standing there, and I was looking at Pete. I was probably about 5 feet from him. He had what appeared to me to be claw marks on his cheek. And he goes, oh, I fell the other day when I was hunting. I was off Thursday, and I was hunting at Sunspot, and he said I fell and got scuffed up.
Wait a minute, let's go back just for a second. Where do you say he was hunting at?
He said he was hunting at Sunspot.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
The place that he's been avoiding?
In all the interviews that have been done, Pete Mullins never put himself on that Sunspot highway. That's where Margie Pointer's remains were found. He told Donnie Bates that he was hunting at Sunspot, and the only way to hunt there is to be on the Sunspot highway. It's like, you got to be kidding me. Are you familiar with the area up here?
No, I'm not.
Nice.
No, I'm not. That's the first time I've ever been out there.
Oh, okay. That's good information right there.
Pete made up that crazy route. He did all that he could to put himself as far away from Sunspot as he could, and he slipped up 27 years ago to one of the first people that showed up to take care of the little boy.
Hello?
Mr. Bradley.
Yes, sir.
After we interviewed Robert Poindexter,
Both of them were going at it pretty good. I don't have no idea what they were arguing.
he helped us identify another witness named Krell Bradley. Krell also worked at the office, but he's been out of the country since before 2000, so he's never been interviewed.
Do you remember a guy by the name of Robert Poindexter?
Yes, I know him.
You and him were together when y'all heard a very loud, heated argument between our victim and our suspect. Do you remember anything about that?
He might have been having an affair with this person.
She was really upset that he was ending a relationship. She was confronting him right there at work.
Okay, Krell, is there any way you could come down to the police department so I can get this on tape?
About 9:30.
9:30? Thank you, sir.
You're quite welcome.
Oh, my God.
There's your motive right there.
Let me ask you this. Where exactly were you in the building when y'all heard this argument?
I was actually going into his office, and I, knock, knock. Well, as soon as I opened the door, I could hear this argument, and I started to back out. She doesn't even wait for me to get out of the room. I don't know if she threw something, but it sounded almost like she threw something. And then I heard him say, I have to do this. I'm married.
You heard those words.
Yeah.
I have to do this. I'm married.
Nice.
I did hear him say, I'm married, and I can't continue doing what we're doing.
Okay.
And she was saying, well, how can you do this?
Your impression was he was breaking off a romantic relationship.
That was my impression.
Was she crying to that point?
No, she was not crying. She was just strictly angry.
Nice. We don't just have insinuations. We have a witness who heard him say he was ending it, Margie was mad, and it was a month or two before she goes missing. Yeah. Lieutenant Schoolcraft.
Yes, ma'am.
Looking at that board, what are your thoughts on whether or not we have enough evidence-wise for you to want to present your case to your district attorney?
Without a doubt. I mean, it's only gotten better.
Our board looks fantastic with all of the little factors listed out that incriminate Pete. What we've been able to find this week are witnesses with specific examples of the closed-door meetings.
Did you ever see Margie Pointer in his office?
Yes.
How many times?
Every day at lunch.
The argument.
And then I heard him say, I have to do this. I'm married.
You heard those words.
Yeah.
I have to do this. I'm married.
Nice. We've been able to find all those things this week that conclusively establish Margie and Pete were having an affair. And then there's the hunting buddies. That specific night, Pete showed up unexpectedly at the cabin.
Did you have any idea he was going to show up?
No, I did not.
Were y'all surprised to see him there?
I was, because I didn't know he was coming.
Pete was upset that they were taking pictures of him. And Pete even commented, why are you doing that? They also noticed that Pete had some scratches on his face, and he had a very sore thumb.
His thumb was all messed up.
I know his face was scratched up and he had something wrong with his thumb.
The evidence shows that Pete's injuries could be defensive wounds. Scratch. Consistent with a scenario in which Pete strangled Margie for several minutes, which would prove a deliberate intent to kill, justifying a first-degree murder charge.
I don't know how you could have this many points against one person and not feel strongly about it. I mean, come on.
This is a good case. It's the kind of case that we are excited to talk to a DA about. Are you ready now to go take it to your DA?
Absolutely.
You think it's time to go?
Yeah.
You think it's time to go?
Absolutely.
Let's go. Roger is excited to present it to the DA, and she can't come talk to us, so we're going to drive our board straight into her office, let Roger stand up there and go over every single circumstance and coincidence and fact and piece of evidence and see what she has to say about the case. Our case against Pete Mullins for the murder of Margie Pointer has been presented to the DA. And Roger and I have just heard back from the DA with her decision. Now it's time to tell the team. She called.
And it doesn't look good.
Here's the good news. Your case is strong. Your case is great. It might be circumstantial. There's nothing wrong with it. It's ready to go right now. But she doesn't want to do it yet.
Oh, man.
The DA has decided not to try and indict Pete for this charge at this time. She doesn't feel that there's enough evidence yet to support a first-degree murder charge. She's not saying you're not ever going to get there. She's just saying, let's keep working. I feel frustration because if you're a cop who believes in a case to the degree that Roger believes in this case, and you know in your heart that you think it's good enough, it's pretty frustrating, it's pretty disappointing, it's pretty depressing.
It hurts my heart. Are these cases easy? No. If they were cases easy, everybody would work them. We're almost at the finish line. We're right there. It's like somebody coming out and stopping and saying you can't go any further. This is where it stops. Well, it doesn't stop here. I'm not done. Any cold case investigator out in this country is going to turn every rock over until you find the right person to help make this case solid and strong.
Hi, this is Mike.
Hi, could I speak to Nancy Grace?
One moment.
As our show has gained in popularity, we've gotten a lot of fans, and Nancy Grace is one of them. Hi, is this Nancy?
Yeah.
We need your help, girl. She's a fellow former prosecutor, and getting all this on her show might result in some witness coming forward with that little bit of information that will motivate the DA to move forward.
I'm happy to do whatever we need to do to put it on the air.
The hope is that there might be another witness out there that knows about the relationship between Pete and Margie. Who knows what it might be, but we just want you to try and get the word out. Because you know how those prosecutors are. They always want a little bit more evidence, right? You remember those days.
Anything we can do, we're happy to do it.
Thanks so much, Nancy.
Actually, thank you for letting me be part of trying to solve this case.
Thank you so much.
Let's get it going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
So let's go tell Jeannie.
I wanted to bring a little bit of her joy back. I want to be the guy calling and said this time was worthwhile. And right now I can't tell him that.
Hi. Hi, how are you?
Well, we've done a lot of work.
Okay.
Basically, we're not quite there yet.
We found new witnesses. We found new information. It is all of our opinion that the case is strong. Roger presented the case to the DA, who has the ultimate decision. She still wants to work with Roger a little bit more. She's hoping to find a little bit more evidence.
We'll have to try to find some more stones out there that I haven't turned over yet. I'm going to find those stones and I'm going to turn them over.
It's going to be okay. Okay. And he is never going to give up.
We owe that. We owe that to your sister, the family. You have my word on it.
I trust you.
Okay.
Just be patient a little bit longer. Okay.
Our day's coming.
What we think is that when this culmination of the evidence, of the witnesses, of all of it is played out in a story for the whole country to see, you'll have your day. Thank you. You're going to have your day. He's going to have his day. Are you okay?
I'm okay.
So you be strong just a little bit longer.
I'll be okay.
Be okay.
Margie, we're going to get this resolved. Your son deserves this. Your husband deserves this. We're going to get this resolved. That's all I want to say to you. We're not going to give up.
Is it going to discourage me? It may discourage me today, but it will happen. That will be a good day for them. It'll be a good day for law enforcement. It'll be a good day for everybody.